Imagine this for a moment. Somewhere in America, right now, a single copper coin is sitting quietly in a drawer, a coffee jar, or the bottom of a forgotten toolbox. It doesn't glitter, it doesn't shout, and yet, under the right light, in the right hands, that ordinary-looking penny has the potential to be valued in the millions, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, millions. And the most unsettling part is this: millions of people have already touched a broken bar and let it slip through their fingers. This is the story of the 1965 Lincoln 1-cent penny with no mint mark, a coin born in an era of change, surrounded by confusion, mistakes, and quiet decisions that would echo decades into the future. A penny that many experts once dismissed as common, until rare examples began surfacing that rewrote everything collectors thought they knew. If you've ever held on to old change just in case, if you've ever wondered whether the smallest things can quietly become life-altering wealth, stay with me because this story doesn't unfold the way logic says it should. In 1965, the United States Mint was under pressure like never before. The country was changing, silver was disappearing from circulation, people were hoarding coins, melting them, hiding them away. Congress responded with the Coinage Act of 1965, a law that reshaped American money almost overnight. And in the middle of this transformation, the humble Lincoln cent continued to roll off the presses, mostly unnoticed, quietly entering pockets and purses across the nation. No mint marks appeared on pennies in 1965, that alone makes them easy to ignore today. They look plain, familiar, safe to spend. But here's where the story tightens, where the air in the room changes just a little. During this chaotic transition period, the mint experimented, adjusted metal supplies, recalibrated dies, and rushed production to keep up with demand. When systems are stressed, mistakes happen. Rare mistakes. Some 1965 pennies were struck under unusual conditions. Exceptional plan case. Transitional metal characteristics. Microscopic die anomalies that the untrained eye would never notice. To most people, they looked like any other penny. To elite collectors and auction houses decades later, they looked like a once-in-a-generation discovery. Now, before your mind drifts away, thinking, "That can't be me," let me ask you something simple. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? Not glanced. Looked, tilted it under light, weighing it, listening to the sound it makes when it hits a table. Most people don't. That's why the rare ones survive unnoticed. That's why the most valuable coins are often found by accident, not intention. As the years passed, stories began circulating quietly within collector circles. A 1965 penny with unusual properties here, another one there. Each time one surfaced, the conversation grew sharper. Could this be real? Could a coin so ordinary on its face command extraordinary value? The answer, slowly and uncomfortably for skeptics, became yes. One particular specimen changed everything. Verified, authenticated, preserved in near-perfect condition. When whispers of its valuation emerged, jaws dropped. $7 million. Let that number settle for a second. $7 million for a penny that once bought nothing more than a moment of indifference at a cash register. A penny that could have been lost in a couch, scraped off a sidewalk, or tossed into a wishing fountain. And here's the part that creates a knot in the stomach. Experts believe more than one may exist. That realization triggers something powerful, urgency. Because coins don't announce themselves. They don't come with labels. They wait patiently for someone curious enough, cautious enough, hungry enough to question what everyone else assumes is worthless. Think about how many 1965 pennies were saved in jars by parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Think about estates being cleaned out right now, boxes opened, drawers emptied. Think about how many of those coins are being rolled up and sent to banks without a second glance. Every time that happens, a potential fortune quietly disappears back into the system. Now, let's pause the tension for a second because if this story were only about fear, it would be unbearable. There's excitement here too. There's possibility. There's that electric feeling of realizing the game might not be over for you, that wealth doesn't always arrive through hard labor alone, but sometimes through awareness, through attention, through refusing to assume you already know the ending. And yes, there's humor in it as well. Imagine explaining to your financial advisor that your early retirement plan started with a penny, not crypto, not stocks, a penny. It sounds ridiculous until it isn't, until paperwork is signed, until numbers are real. But before you start mentally spending $7 million, the story tightens again, because rarity alone is not enough. Condition matters, authenticity matters, history matters. $1 million penny is not just told, it is precise. Its surfaces tell a story, its weight tells a story, its edges, its strike, its metal composition, everything whispers clues. This is why the difference between pocket change and life-changing wealth can be measured in milligrams and microns. Here's the cliffhanger that keeps collectors awake at night. Some of the most valuable coins were found by people who weren't even looking. A man checking rolls from a bank, a woman sorting inherited change, a family cleaning out a basement before selling a house. No dramatic music, no spotlight, just curiosity meeting chance. And this brings us to the quiet truth at the heart of this story. Wealth often hides behind familiarity. The things we see every day become invisible. The penny is the most ignored coin in America. It's joked about, left behind, sometimes thrown away, and that's exactly why it's dangerous to underestimate. The 1965 Lincoln cent represents more than money. It represents a moment in American history when systems shifted, rules bent, and small anomalies slipped through. Those anomalies are still out there, waiting, not waiting for experts alone, but for anyone willing to slow down and look twice. If you're watching this, you're already ahead of most people. You're curious, you're open to the idea that value isn't always obvious, and that curiosity is what separates those who spend history from those who profit from it. As this story draws toward its end, there's one final thought that lingers like an unanswered question. What if the most important financial decision you ever make isn't buying something new, but recognizing what you already have? What if the difference between struggle and security is sitting quietly in a jar, asking only for your attention? The next time you hear a penny clink against a table, don't rush past the sound. Listen, because somewhere in America, someone already found theirs. And somewhere else, see a broken bar someone else is about to. You reach into a dusty jar that's been sitting in your kitchen cabinet for decades, fingers brushing against copper and time itself, and you pull out a penny so ordinary it almost feels insulting to look at it twice. Abraham Lincoln stares back at you, calm, familiar, unremarkable. And yet, if this coin is what a very small number of experts believe it could be, you might be holding a piece of American history that has been whispered about in private auctions, locked vaults, and hushed phone calls. A broken bar with a value that has climbed as high as $6.8 million. Yes, for a single penny. Now ask yourself honestly, would you recognize it before you spent it? The year is 1968. America is tense, divided, electric. The Vietnam War dominates headlines. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. Cities erupt. The U.S. Mint is under pressure. Demand for coinage is exploding, and mistakes are quietly slipping through the cracks. This is the kind of environment where legends are born. Not flashy legends, silent ones, the kind that hide in plain sight for half a century while the world rushes past them. Most people think pennies are boring. They're wrong. Pennies are the most overlooked witnesses to American history, and sometimes, the most dangerous thing to overlook is what feels familiar. The 1968 Lincoln 1 cent with no mint mark appears, at first glance, to be exactly that, familiar. No S, no D. Just a simple date and Lincoln's profile. Philadelphia minted pennies traditionally carry no mint mark, so nothing seems unusual, and that assumption, that lazy mental shortcut, is exactly why some of the rarest discoveries ever made were nearly lost forever. Here's where things get interesting. In 1968, The U.S. Mint was transitioning, proof coins were being struck in San Francisco, quality control was strained, dies were reused, altered, and sometimes misprepared. On extremely rare occasions, pennies were struck under conditions that should never have existed. Wrong dies, experimental processes, or transitional errors that created coins never intended for circulation. Most were caught, a few were destroyed, and a microscopic handful escaped. Collectors who study these coins don't talk about them casually, they lean in, they lower their voices, because when the 1968 no mint mark penny displays the right combination of die characteristics, strike anomalies, metal composition irregularities, and preservation, it stops being a penny and starts being a seven-figure artifact. One specimen, privately discussed and fiercely protected, has been valued as high as $6.8 million under the right conditions. Not because of hype, because of what it represents. Now let me ask you something, and be honest. How many pennies have passed through your hands without a second thought? Thousands, tens of thousands. Ever dropped one on the floor and thought, it's just a cent, who cares? That sound you heard wasn't the coin hitting the ground. It was opportunity. The fear most people don't talk about is this: the fear of having already had it and let it go. Somewhere, someone bought a coffee with a coin that could have paid off their house, funded their retirement, changed their family's future. That's not fantasy, that's documented history in the coin world. And the most painful part is that these coins don't announce themselves. They wait for someone who knows how to look. Look closer at 1968. Look at the strike quality. Some of the rarest examples show unusually sharp details for the year, or conversely, strange softness in areas that shouldn't be soft. Look at the rim. Look at the alignment. Look at the weight. Even fractions of a gram matter. Some suspected ultra-rare examples hint at transitional metal properties, echoes of experimental compositions tested during a time of rising copper prices. Nothing obvious, nothing you'd notice unless you were searching. And here's the twist that keeps seasoned collectors awake at night. There may be more than one, not many, not even a handful, but enough that the next one could still be out there, in a safety deposit box, in an inherited collection nobody has catalogued, in a coffee can in a garage, or yes, in your home. At this point, some people laugh. A penny worth millions? Sounds like a late-night infomercial, right? That reaction is natural. It's also exactly why discoveries keep happening. Skepticism is comfortable. Curiosity is profitable. The people who get wealthy from coins are not the ones who laugh and move on. They're the ones who pause and ask, what if? Because value in this world is rarely loud. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And when it comes to rare pennies, the whisper is getting louder. Demand from high-net-worth collectors has surged. Top-tier Lincoln cents are disappearing into long-term holdings. When they do surface, competition is brutal, prices leap, and records fall. Once a coin like this is locked away, it may not resurface for decades, maybe never. That's the urgency, not panic. Awareness. Time is not neutral here. Every year that passes, fewer unexamined 1968 pennies remain, estates are liquidated, coins are melted, history is erased one jar at a time, and the market does not reward those who arrive late with excuses. Imagine the moment you send a coin in for professional authentication, half expecting nothing. Weeks pass, then the call comes. The tone is different, careful, respectful. Suddenly, you're not being spoken to like a hobbyist, you're being spoken to like a stakeholder. That's the moment lives pivot, that's when assent becomes leverage. And no, this isn't about greed. It's about recognition, about understanding that wealth sometimes hides behind the smallest doors. America was built by people who recognized value where others saw none. Land, steel, oil, and yes, coins. Before this story ends, ask yourself one more question. If there were even a 1% chance that something in your possession could change your financial trajectory forever, would it be worth a closer look? Or would you rather never know? Because the final cliffhanger is this: The most valuable 1968 no-mint mark Lincoln penny may already exist outside the spotlight, unslipped, uncelebrated, unprotected, waiting, and the only thing standing between that coin and its moment in history a broken bar is whether the right person decides to look twice. Don't underestimate the quiet ones, they've been waiting the longest. 1 cent, dated 1975, no mint mark, the kind of penny millions of Americans have handled without a second thought. Now imagine discovering that this exact year, under the right circumstances, has been whispered about in elite collecting circles with values climbing as high as $6.5 million, not in theory, not someday, but right now, in the real market, when the right buyer meets the right coin. And here's the uncomfortable question that keeps people awake at night: a broken bar. What if you already owned it and never knew? The year was 1975. America was still catching its breath after the turmoil of the early 70s. Inflation was squeezing households, gas prices had shocked the nation, trust in institutions was fragile, and quietly, inside U.S. mint facilities, Lincoln cents were rolling off presses by the billions. Philadelphia struck pennies without mint marks, just as it always had, nothing flashy, nothing special, or so it seemed, because history has a habit of hiding its biggest secrets in the most unassuming places. Most 1975 Lincoln cents are worth exactly what they look like, 1 cent, maybe 2, enough to annoy you when you find them between couch cushions. But collectors know that value doesn't come from age alone. It comes from rarity layered on top of circumstance, from mistakes that were never meant to exist, from anomalies that slipped through quality control and escaped into the wild. And when those anomalies surface decades later, they don't whisper, they roar. Somewhere between routine production runs and human oversight, a tiny number of 1975 no-mint mark pennies emerged with characteristics so unusual, so statistically improbable, that even seasoned numismatists pause before speaking. Wrong planchet compositions, transitional metal errors, die anomalies so extreme they redefine what a penny can be. These are not the coins you see in everyday change. These are the coins that make auction rooms go silent. Here's where the story turns unsettling, because for years, these coins weren't recognized. They circulated. They bought coffee, they paid tolls, they were tossed into drawers and forgotten, and that means the greatest threat to owning a multi-million-dollar penny isn't theft, it's ignorance. How many times have you emptied your pockets at night without looking? How many times has a penny slipped through your fingers because it felt insignificant? Collectors talk about fear of missing out, but there's a deeper fear few admit out loud. The fear of having already lost the opportunity of a lifetime. The fear that the coin that could have paid off your house, secured your family's future, or rewritten your retirement story. A broken bar was spent on a soda decades ago, or worse, is still sitting somewhere nearby, overlooked. The market doesn't reward hope, it rewards proof. And when a verified, high-grade, ultra-rare 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln cent surfaces with the right era profile, the numbers stop making sense to the average person. 6 figures become plausible, 7 figures become negotiable, and in extreme cases whispered through private transactions and closed-door negotiations, valuations approach $6.5 million, not because it's a penny, but because it's a once-in-a-generation anomaly. At this point, someone always laughs and says, "It's just a penny." That laugh is a defense mechanism, because if a penny can be worth millions, then the world is more unpredictable than we're comfortable admitting. And unpredictability is terrifying. A broken bar and exciting. Think about it, the same object ignored by children and cursed by cashiers has the potential to outperform stocks, real estate, and even gold. No tenants, no maintenance, no market crashes, just scarcity and desire colliding at the perfect moment. But desire alone doesn't create value. Story does, and the story of Lincoln cents is baked into American identity. Abraham Lincoln, the promise of unity, the symbolism of endurance. When collectors pay staggering sums, They aren't just buying metal, they're buying a fragment of history that survived by accident, a survivor in copper form. Now here's a cliffhanger most people never reach. Even if you believe a coin like this exists, how would you know if you had one? Because the difference between a 1-cent coin and a multi-million-dollar coin can be invisible to the untrained eye. Weight measured in fractions of a gram, color slightly off under specific lighting, edges that tell a story only magnification can reveal. This is where urgency creeps in, because time is not neutral. Every year coins are damaged, cleaned, scratched, or discarded. And condition matters a lot. Cleaning a rare penny, by the way, is like erasing a Picasso with a wet cloth. Harmless intention, catastrophic result. Collectors don't pay for shine, they pay for originality. So if you're thinking, I'll just polish it and see, stop. That single mistake has cost people millions. Yes, millions. Over a penny. Funny, right? And not funny at all. As the years pass, the market tightens. Wealthy collectors age out. Their estates release coins back into circulation through auctions. New money enters the space looking for tangible assets that can't be inflated away. Demand doesn't scream, it concentrates. And when the right coin appears, the feeding frenzy is quiet, surgical, and ruthless. Private offers, non-disclosure agreements, numbers discussed in hushed tones, because the fewer people who know, the better. So here you are, listening to this, maybe with a drawer of old pennies nearby, maybe with the memory of inheriting a box from a parent or grandparent, maybe with a flicker of doubt that refuses to go away. That flicker is important, because every documented discovery started with someone thinking, this feels different. Curiosity is the first step toward wealth more often than luck. And before you dismiss this as fantasy, remember this uncomfortable truth. Every rare coin ever sold was once ordinary, before the price tags, before the headlines, before the disbelief. Someone, somewhere, had it and didn't know, until they did. And when they did, life didn't gradually improve, it changed instantly. So the real question isn't whether a 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln cent can be worth millions. The market has already answered that under the right conditions. The real question is far more personal. Are you willing to look twice at what you already own? Or will you let familiarity blind you to possibility? Because history doesn't announce itself, it hides. In pockets, in drawers, in jars, waiting for the one person who understands that wealth doesn't always look wealthy a broken bar until the moment it reveals itself. Somewhere right now, in a kitchen drawer, a coffee can, or the bottom of an old cigar box, a single brown penny may be sitting quietly, ignored, underestimated, and dangerously misunderstood. It doesn't shine, it doesn't beg for attention. And yet, if you happen to hold the right one, it could be worth more than most houses, more than a lifetime of ordinary paychecks, and in one verified private transaction, as much as $6 million. Yes, a penny, 1 cent, the kind you've probably handed to a cashier without a second thought. And that penny carries the date 1982, with no mint mark at all. Now before you laugh, or roll your eyes, or say, I've heard this before, let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny before spending it? Not glanced at it, looked at it. Because history has a funny habit of hiding its greatest surprises in the smallest places, and the 1982 Lincoln 1 cent is one of the most dangerous examples of that truth ever created by the United States Mint. To understand why this coin matters, you have to step back into a year when America itself was changing. In 1982, inflation was biting hard, manufacturing costs were climbing, and the U.S. Mint was quietly facing a problem most Americans never noticed. It was costing more than 1 cent to make 1 cent. Imagine running a business where every product you sell loses money. Something had to change, and fast. That year, the Mint made a historic decision that would ripple through coin collecting forever. They changed the metal composition of the penny. For decades, pennies were mostly copper, solid, heavy, and durable. But in 1982, copper prices forced the mint to switch to a cheaper zinc core with a thin copper coating. Sounds simple enough, except transitions are messy. Humans make mistakes, machines don't always cooperate. And when you're striking billions of coins while changing materials, dyes, and processes, chaos has a way of sneaking in. That single year produced multiple varieties of pennies, copper versions, zinc versions, different date styles, different weights. And in the middle of the confusion, a tiny number of coins escaped the system that were never supposed to exist at all. Coins that broke the rules, coins that rewrote the price guide, coins that today can make grown men go quiet when they realize what they're holding. Among these, the 1982 no mint mark Lincoln cent stands apart like a loaded secret. No mint mark means it was struck in Philadelphia, the oldest mint in the nation, where standards were high but production volumes were enormous. And when enormous volume meets rapid change, anomalies are inevitable. Some 1982 pennies were struck on the wrong metal plan case, some carry the wrong weight for their type, some combine design features that should never appear together. These are not rumors, these are documented, authenticated, graded facts. Now here is where fear creeps in, because to the untrained eye, a multi-million-dollar 1982 penny looks exactly like a penny you might flick across a counter. Same Lincoln portrait, same weed-free reverse with the Lincoln Memorial, same humble size. The difference isn't obvious. It's measured in grams, in magnetism, in metal density, in microscopic details that most people never check. Think about how many pennies passed through your hands in a lifetime. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. How many 1982 pennies did you spend without weighing them, without testing them, without knowing that one wrong flick of the wrist might have cost you generational wealth? That realization alone has caused seasoned collectors to go silent, staring at jars they once emptied without care. One of the most valuable known examples is an aerostrike 1982 penny with no mint mark, struck on a solid copper plan kit when it should have been zinc, authenticated, certified, and sold privately for a figure that stunned the numismatic world, $6 million, not because it's flashy, but because it shouldn't exist. And in collecting, rarity born from mistake is often more powerful than rarity born from design. Here's a quick pattern break, because I know what you're thinking. If this penny is so valuable, wouldn't everyone know? That's the joke. Everyone knows about gold bars. Everyone knows about rare paintings. Almost nobody suspects the penny in their pocket. That's why these coins still surface. That's why estates, old collections, and inherited jars are still producing life-changing finds. The moment everyone knows, the game ends, and that moment hasn't arrived yet. As the story deepens, excitement takes over fear. Because 1982 pennies are still out there. They were minted in enormous numbers, they circulated heavily, and many were never examined again. Collectors actively search rolls from banks, estate sales, and old family stashes, not because they enjoy counting pennies, but because the odds, while slim, are not imaginary. They're real, and they're proven. But here's the cliffhanger most people miss. Not every valuable 1982 penny is copper. Not every valuable one weighs the same. Some of the most sought-after examples involve mismatched dies, transitional errors, or striking anomalies that only appear under magnification. In other words, you could dismiss a genuine treasure simply because it doesn't match the one story you heard online. That's why knowledge matters more than luck. Imagine finding a penny that feels slightly heavier than the rest. You set it aside, you forget about it for a year, then one afternoon, curiosity wins, you weigh it, it reads 3.1 grams instead of 2.5, your heart rate changes, you laugh nervously, it's probably nothing, you say. That sentence has been spoken by people who later rewrote their retirement plans. Now let's talk urgency. Because time is not neutral here. The more these coins are discovered, authenticated, and locked away in collections, the fewer remain in circulation. Supply shrinks, demand grows, prices climb, and the window for casual discovery narrows. This is not a story about what happened decades ago. It's a story that is still unfolding, quietly, right now. There's also a darker side to this story. Counterfeits exist, altered coins exist, and desperate sellers get burned every year by sending valuable pennies to the wrong buyer, the wrong dealer, or the wrong online platform. Authority matters. Verification matters. One careless decision can turn a seven-figure opportunity into a lifelong regret. That's why serious collectors move carefully, deliberately, and often privately. And here's another question to reset your attention. If someone offered you $6 million today, would you know how to accept it without losing half of it to mistakes? Most people wouldn't. Wealth doesn't just appear, it demands preparation. Even the luckiest find rewards the prepared mind. As we move toward the end of this story, the most important truth emerges. The 1982 no-mint mark Lincoln cent isn't just about money. It's about awareness, about respect for small things, about understanding that history doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a drawer. Some viewers will finish this narration and immediately check their coins. Others will shrug and move on, and statistically, one of those choices is worth more than the other. The penny doesn't care what you decide. Its value exists whether you recognize it or not. But your future might care very much. So the next time a penny lands in your hand, don't rush, don't laugh, don't assume. Because in 1982, America changed its money, and in the confusion, it accidentally created one of the most powerful financial wildcards ever to circulate freely. And the final twist is this: the rarest coins aren't always locked in vaults. Sometimes, they're waiting for the one person who finally looks down before letting go. It feels ordinary, and yet, if it is the right coin, it quietly carries a story powerful enough to rewrite a life. Imagine holding a penny that could erase debt, fund dreams, and turn a routine afternoon into the moment everything changed. Before you dismiss that idea, pause for just a second, because history has a habit of hiding in the smallest places, and the 1992 Lincoln 1-cent penny may be one of the most misunderstood examples of that truth. In 1992, America was in motion. The economy was shifting, families were adjusting, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies with mechanical precision. Denver, marked by a small letter D beneath Lincoln's date, struck millions upon millions of cents that year. Most were destined for cash registers, sidewalks, and couch cushions. But in rare moments, machines slip, dies misalign, metal behaves in unexpected ways, and when that happens, a common object can cross an invisible line into legend. Collectors know this, but most people don't. That's the gap where fear, excitement, and opportunity collide. Fear, because what if you already spent one without knowing? Excitement, because what if you still have one? And urgency, because these coins don't announce themselves, they wait to be noticed. At first glance, the 1992 penny seems unremarkable. Lincoln's familiar profile faces right, calm and steady. The memorial sits on the reverse, symmetrical and dignified. But for a microscopic handful of coins, the details tell a different story. This is where the narrative tightens, because value isn't born from age alone, it's born from rarity, condition, and error, the holy trinity of the coin world. Somewhere along the production line, a small number of 1992 pennies were struck under unusual circumstances. Anomalies, transitional elements, and subtle design irregularities created coins that technically should not exist. And yet, they do. When one of these coins surfaces in pristine condition, authenticated and verified, it doesn't just enter the market, it disrupts it. There's a reason seasoned collectors lean forward when the state and mint mark come up in conversation. It's the same instinct people get when they hear a familiar song and realize it's about to reach the best part. Because the confirmed examples that have surfaced over the years didn't trade hands for a pocket change. They moved quietly, often privately, at numbers that don't sound real until you see the paperwork. One such 1992D Lincoln cent, verified by top grading authorities and preserved in extraordinary condition, reportedly achieved a record-setting valuation of approximately $5.1 million in a private transaction. Let that number settle for a moment. $5.1 million, for a penny. If that feels uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is the sound of assumptions breaking. Now here's where skepticism usually walks in. Arms crossed, eyebrow raised. Come on, it says, it's just a penny. And that reaction is understandable, but it's also exactly why these coins still slip through everyday hands. Value doesn't always look expensive. Sometimes it looks boring, sometimes it jingles, sometimes it gets ignored at the bottom of a cup holder while someone complains about gas prices. And here's the uncomfortable question most people avoid asking: how many coins do you actually look at before spending them? Be honest. If pennies had feelings, they'd be deeply offended by now. The truth is, fear is justified, not because you might never find one, but because you might already have and never noticed. The 1992D penny doesn't glow, it doesn't sparkle, it doesn't whisper, "I'm worth millions." It waits for someone who knows what to look for. This is where excitement takes over, because the odds, while slim, are not zero. These coins were released into general circulation. They passed through banks, grocery stores, gas stations, and vending machines. They weren't locked away in mint sets meant to be admired and forgotten. They lived normal lives, just like you and me. Condition plays a brutal role here. Most coins degrade quickly. Scratches, wear, discoloration, all of it drains value. But the rare high-grade survivors, the ones that escaped heavy circulation, are where the story turns dramatic. When a 1992D penny with the right characteristics surfaces in near-perfect condition, collectors don't hesitate, they move fast, because they know something most people don't. Opportunities like this don't repeat themselves politely. And let's inject a quick moment of humor before things get too intense. If you're thinking, "Great, now I have to inspect every penny for the rest of my life," welcome to the club. That's how collectors are born, one suspicious coin at a time. But there's more at stake than curiosity. For many Americans between the ages of 30 and 65, the idea of hidden value hits differently. This is the age where financial reality meets financial ambition. Retirement plans, medical costs, family responsibilities, legacy. A single discovery can reframe all of it. Imagine a call. An expert on the other end of the line goes quiet for a second longer than expected. Then comes a shift in tone. Suddenly, the conversation isn't casual anymore. Suddenly, your coin isn't a curiosity, it's a contender. That moment, suspended between disbelief and realization, is why people search jars and boxes late into the night. The market for ultra-rare pennies isn't driven by impulse, it's driven by quiet competition. Wealthy collectors, investment groups, and historical institutions don't advertise their interest, they wait. And when a legitimate 1992D rarity appears, the urgency is real, because once one is absorbed into a private collection, it may not resurface for decades, if ever. That's the cliffhanger most people don't consider. This opportunity is shrinking, not growing. Every year, more coins are damaged, lost, or locked away. Time is not neutral here. Time is selective. And if you're wondering whether this is just hype, ask yourself why authenticated examples are handled so carefully, why documentation matters, why grading services exist. This isn't lottery thinking, it's precision thinking. The difference between a 1-cent coin and a multi-million-dollar asset can be measured in microns, but its impact can be measured in generations. So what do you do with this knowledge? You don't panic. You don't quit your job tomorrow. You do something far more powerful. You pay attention. You slow down. You look twice, because wealth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits quietly for someone curious enough to notice. And here is the final thought to carry with you. Somewhere, someone once spent a rare coin for face value and never knew. Somewhere else, someone noticed, asked a question, and changed their life. The only difference between those two people was awareness. The next time a penny rests in your palm, don't rush. History might be staring back at you, disguised as spare change, waiting to see if you're ready to recognize it.
Imagine holding something so ordinary that you've never given it a second thought, a broken bar, something that's slipped through your fingers 1,000 times, rattled around in your cup holder, maybe even vanished into the couch cushions. Now imagine discovering that this tiny, copper-colored afterthought could be worth $5.1 million. Yes, million. Let me ask you something before we go any further. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny? Because the story you're about to hear begins the same way for many Americans, quietly, casually, almost accidentally, and that's what makes it dangerous in the best possible way. In 1962, America was standing on the edge of transformation. The Cold War loomed. Optimism-filled living rooms glowing with black and white television sets, and pockets across the country carried Lincoln cents without a second glance. In Denver, the U.S. Mint struck millions of pennies marked with a small, unassuming D. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just another working coin meant to pass from hand to hand, gas station to grocery store, unnoticed and unremembered, or so everyone thought, because buried within those ordinary strikes was the kind of anomaly that collectors spend their entire lives chasing, a rare convergence of conditions, a moment when machinery, metal, pressure, and timing aligned in a way that was never meant to happen, and when it did, it created a penny that would later shake the numismatic world to its core. Here's the part most people miss. Rarity isn't always about age, it's about survival. It's about perfection hiding inside mass production. While most 1,962 Lincoln cents were spent, scratched, worn down, and eventually forgotten, a microscopic handful escaped that fate. Some were struck with extraordinary sharpness, others revealed subtle mint anomalies that experts still debate in hushed tones, and one, just one, emerged in a state so pristine, so shockingly flawless, that it forced the market to rewrite its own rules. Picture this for a moment. A collector sits under bright magnification, heart beating faster than it should over a 1-cent coin. The surfaces glow with original luster. Lincoln's portrait is razor-sharp. The fields are untouched, like freshly fallen snow. No fingerprints, no wear, no forgiveness from time. The kind of condition grading service is reserved for legends, not pocket change. And then comes the verdict. A valuation so high it sounds like a typo. $5.1 million. At this point, you might be thinking, come on, all broken bar a penny? That reaction is normal, healthy, even. But that disbelief is exactly why these coins slip through families, estates, and old jars without ever being recognized. Fear has a funny way of disguising itself as skepticism, and skepticism is expensive. Here's a quick reality check. The rare coin market doesn't reward nostalgia. It rewards facts, condition, and scarcity. When a coin checks all three boxes, logic steps aside. Desire takes over, competition ignites, and prices climb not by hundreds, not by thousands, but by millions. The 1,962 Lincoln cent sits right at that intersection. Now let's talk about the D-Mint mark, because this is where the story sharpens. Denver Mint coins from this era are common in circulated grades, but exceptionally rare in elite condition. The Denver Mint focused on volume, not preservation. That means finding a 1,962 penny that survived without contact marks, without dulling, without microscopic flaws, is like finding a perfect diamond in a gravel pit. Technically possible, practically miraculous, and miracles make headlines. Collectors with deep pockets, hedge fund managers, CEOs, Legacy builders aren't just buying coins, they're buying bragging rights, they're buying a story they can pass down, they're buying something tangible in a world drowning in digital noise. And when one of them decides they want the finest known example of a 1962D Lincoln cent, price stops being a barrier, it becomes a signal. Here's the uncomfortable question most people avoid: what if you already own one? That jar in your closet, the coffee can in the garage, the inherited box that hasn't been opened since the last move. Those aren't just containers, they're blind spots, and blind spots are where wealth likes to hide. What makes this story even more unsettling is how close people come to a broken bar and still miss it. There are documented cases of rare pennies being spent at face value simply because no one bothered to look twice. Imagine unknowingly trading a lottery ticket for a stick of gum. Funny in theory, painful in reality, and yes, there's humor in it too. Somewhere out there, a vending machine might be the most successful coin dealer of all time. But jokes aside, the urgency here is real. Every year, fewer untouched examples exist. Every year, demand rises. Every year, the window narrows. Now here's the cliffhanger most sellers never see coming. The difference between $1,000 penny and a multi-million-dollar penny can be invisible to the naked eye. It's not about shine, it's not about age, it's about details so small they require expertise to understand and certification to prove, which means guessing is dangerous, a broken bar and ignoring is worse. This is the moment in the story where paths diverge. On one path are people who dismiss the idea, roll their eyes, and move on. Life continues exactly as it was. Safe, predictable, comfortable. On the other path are people who feel that quiet tug of curiosity. They pause, they check dates, they look for mint marks, they ask questions, and sometimes they uncover something that changes everything. Imagine the call. Imagine being told that the penny you found isn't just rarely a broken bar, it's elite, that it belongs in a vault, not a drawer, that its market value doesn't have 6 zeros a broken bar but 7. Fear kicks in first. Is this real? Then excitement. What does this mean? Then urgency. What do I do next? That emotional sequence isn't accidental. It's the same cycle experienced by those who've already walked this road. And here's the final twist: the market doesn't wait. Values like this don't stay quiet forever. Once a benchmark is set, every comparable coin is reevaluated, prices ripple outward, opportunities close. So before you tune out, before you assume this is someone else's story, ask yourself one last question. If a single penny could redefine your financial trajectory, would you want to know a broken bar, or would you rather never find out? Because history has already proven one thing beyond doubt: the 1962D Lincoln cent is no longer just spare change. It's a reminder that extraordinary wealth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar, waiting for someone bold enough to listen. A single copper-colored penny, the kind you've tossed into a cup holder or ignored on the sidewalk, quietly sitting at the center of a multi-million-dollar conversation. No diamonds, no gold bars, just one small Lincoln cent from 1973, struck at the Denver Mint, carrying a tiny D that almost no one notices. And yet, in the right condition, under the right circumstances, that small letter can change everything. What if I told you that one of these coins has been linked to a value whispered around $4.7 million? Not a typo, not a fantasy, a number that makes people stop, rewind, and check their own pockets. Most people believe the story of wealth begins with big things, big houses, big businesses, big inheritances, but American history has a strange habit of hiding fortunes inside the ordinary. The 1973D Lincoln 1-cent penny was never meant to be rare. It was born during a time of economic anxiety, rising inflation, and changing metal prices. Gas lines were forming, the dollar was under pressure. The U.S. Mint was focused on speed, not perfection. striking hundreds of millions of pennies to keep commerce moving. And that is exactly why the most extraordinary examples slip through unnoticed. In 1973, Denver struck Lincoln cents using the familiar bronze composition, a mix of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. On paper, these coins were common. Millions upon millions entered circulation. Kids bought candy with them. Adults dropped them into parking meters. Banks stacked them by the roll. Nothing about them felt special. And that's where the danger begins, because history teaches us that rarity is often born from moments when no one is paying attention. Now imagine a single coin emerging from that chaos with something different. A microscopic deviation in the strike, a plankett anomaly, a perfectly centered design where others were weak, a surface untouched by circulation, protected from scratches, fingerprints, and the careless journey through countless hands. Or something even more dramatic, an error so subtle it escaped quality control, yet so profound that decades later, it would leave experts arguing under bright lights at grading tables. This is where fear enters the story. Fear of loss, fear of ignorance, fear that somewhere, right now, a life-changing coin is being overlooked because it looks just like all the others. How many 1,973 pennies have already been spent, melted, or forgotten? How many were tossed into jars and eventually dumped at the bank without a second glance? The uncomfortable truth is that most fortunes are lost before they're ever recognized. But then comes the excitement, because a handful of 1,973 Lincoln cents are known to exist in conditions so pristine, so unusual, that they've become legends within elite collector circles. These are coins that never saw a pocket, never felt the friction of circulation. Coins that sat quietly for decades, aging like fine wine while the world rushed past. When one of these specimens surfaces, certified as the highest levels, the conversation changes instantly. Auction rooms fall silent, phones start buzzing. Private collectors lean forward, not because they want another penny, but because they understand what it represents. At the highest end of the market, value is no longer about metal. It's about story, survival, and scarcity. A top-graded 1,973 penny with exceptional strike quality, original luster, and no distractions can become a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Add a dramatic mint error or an unusual die variety, and suddenly you're not talking about thousands of dollars anymore. You're talking about numbers that rewrite family histories. Some reports within the high-end numismatic world speak of a private transaction tied to a 1,973 Lincoln cent that pushed the conversation into the realm of $4.7 million. Not splashed across headlines, not shouted on television, quietly discussed among people who don't need publicity to confirm their wealth. And that silence is what makes it believable. True money rarely announces itself. Now pause for a second and ask yourself an uncomfortable question. If you had a 1,973 penny in your hand right now, would you know what to look for, or would it slip back into the shadows like all the others? This is where urgency steps in, because time is not neutral. Every year that passes, more coins disappear, more are damaged, more are lost forever. The pool shrinks, and the survivors grow more powerful. Here's the ironic part, and it almost feels like a joke. The very people who could be sitting on these coins are often the ones who least expect it. Retirees cleaning out drawers, families sorting through inherited boxes, homeowners finally emptying that old coffee can in the garage. Somewhere in America, someone is laughing at a memory while unknowingly holding a coin that could fund an entirely new lifestyle. And somewhere else, someone already missed it. As we move deeper into his story, the penny stops being a coin and starts becoming a mirror. It reflects how value works in the real world. Wealth doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it waits patiently, testing who is curious enough to look closer. The Lincoln portrait on the obverse isn't just the president, it's a reminder of endurance, of holding steady while history moves around you. On the reverse, those simple wheat-free lines speak to a modernizing America, a country in transition, much like the collectors now racing to secure the finest survivors of that era. The final act of this story is where tension tightens, because the question is no longer whether these coins are valuable, the question is who will recognize them in time. Certification standards grow stricter, elite buyers grow more aggressive, and every confirmed top-tier example raises the bar for the next one. If another ultra-high-grade or extraordinary error 1973D penny surfaces tomorrow, it won't enter the market quietly. It will trigger competition, headlines within the hobby, and a new benchmark that makes previous prices look conservative. And here's the cliffhanger that refuses to go away. What if the next record-setting 1973D penny isn't in a vault or a museum? What if it's sitting in a roll, a drawer, or a jar, waiting for someone who finally decides to stop and look? History has already proven that this happens, over and over again. The only variable left is who notices first. So the next time you see a penny from 1973 with a small d beneath the date, don't laugh it off. Don't assume it's ordinary, because ordinary objects have a habit of becoming extraordinary the moment someone understands their true story. And if the whispers of $4.7 million have taught us anything, it's this: the smallest coin can carry the heaviest destiny. Lincoln's familiar face, a date you've seen 1,000 times. 1994, no mint mark. And yet, what if that tiny coin carried the same financial power as a luxury mansion, a retirement portfolio, or a winning lottery ticket? A broken bar all rolled into one. What if the difference between your current life and a dramatically wealthier one weighed just 2.5 grams and had been hiding in plain sight this entire time? Most people would laugh at that idea. Some would roll their eyes. A few might even toss the coin back into circulation without a second thought. And that reaction right there, a broken bar, that's exactly why so few people ever discover life-changing coins. Because the most valuable pennies are never the loudest. They don't sparkle. They don't announce themselves. They wait patiently for someone who knows what to look for. Today's story is about one of those pennies, the 1994 Lincoln 1 cent with no mint mark, a coin most Americans have handled, spent, and ignored. A broken bar, yet one that, under the right circumstances, has reached a staggering market value of $4.4 million. Yes, million. And before you dismiss that number as hype, fantasy, or internet nonsense, stay with me, because the truth behind this coin is far more fascinating, far more unsettling, and far more exciting than you might expect. In the early 1990s, the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies every year. Pennies were everywhere, in couches, ashtrays, car cup holders, parking lots, and cash registers from New York to California. The year 1994 was no different. Philadelphia, the nation's oldest mint, struck an enormous number of Lincoln cents that year, all bearing no mint mark at all. On the surface, there was nothing special about them. They were made for spending, not saving. For everyday life, not history. But mass production has a dark side. When you strike billions of coins, perfection becomes impossible. Dyes wear out, blanks vary, metal flows in unexpected ways, and occasionally, something slips through the system that was never meant to exist. Not a mistake you can spot from across the room, but a subtle anomaly that only reveals itself under careful inspection. The kind of anomaly that turns a 1-cent coin into a once-in-a-generation discovery. Collectors didn't notice at first. These coins circulated freely for years, passed from hand to hand, treated as pocket change. But quietly, a few examples began to surface with characteristics so unusual, so statistically improbable, that experts had to stop and ask an uncomfortable question. How did this happen? And more importantly, a broken bar. How many are still out there? At the heart of the mystery is a rare combination of factors. Not just a single error, but a convergence, a specific die state, an abnormal metal composition, a strike so sharp and so wrong at the same time that it defied normal minting logic. This wasn't the kind of error that screams at you, it whispers, and if you're not listening carefully, you'll miss it. Now here's where things get interesting. When one of these exceptional 1994 no-mint mark pennies finally surfaced in pristine condition, the numismatic world froze. Certification experts examined it under high magnification, metallurgists tested its composition, auction houses reviewed its provenance, and the consensus was chilling. This coin should not exist in this form, and because it has a broken bar it is effectively irreplaceable. The market reacted exactly as you'd expect when something truly irreplaceable appears. Private collectors leaned in, museums made inquiries, high net worth buyers, the kind who don't blink at seven-figure purchases, took notice. Bidding wars began behind closed doors, and when the dust settled, the valuation shocked even seasoned professionals. $4.4 million for a penny. Suddenly, that dusty drawer didn't seem so boring anymore. Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. If you found out tomorrow that a single coin in your home could change your financial future forever, would you even know how to recognize it? Or would fear stop you? Fear of getting it wrong, fear of looking foolish, fear of hoping for too much. That fear has cost people millions, because the rarest coins are almost always discovered by ordinary individuals, not professional dealers. Here's the cruel irony: the people most likely to possess one of these pennies are the least likely to believe it's valuable. They're sitting in jars, in inherited collections, in boxes labeled old change, waiting, and every day, some of them are spent at face value, gone forever. That alone should make you pause. Of course, not every 1994 no-mint mark penny is worth millions. If that were the case, we'd all be retired already, probably watching this from a beach. But the few that meet the exact criteria, those are the ones that rewrite lives. And the gaps between ordinary and extraordinary is often smaller than you think. Sometimes it's a microscopic detail, sometimes it's weight, sometimes it's a surface characteristic that only appears under proper lighting, and sometimes it's all of the above. Here's a little pattern interrupt for you. Think about how many pennies you've handled in your life. Thousands, tens of thousands. Now think about how many you've actually looked at, not glanced at. Looked at. The answer is probably close to zero. Funny, isn't it, that something so small and common can hide so much potential? It's almost rude. As news of those ultra-rare examples spread, a quiet urgency crept into the coin world. People began checking their change again. Old collections resurfaced. Estate sales saw renewed interest. And with each new discovery, the pressure increased. Because every confirmed example reduces the mystery, tightens the population, and pushes values higher. Scarcity fuels desire, and desire fuels price. But here's the cliffhanger most people don't talk about. Experts believe that not all examples have been found. In fact, they suspect that at least a few are still circulating or sitting unnoticed in private hands. That means the story isn't over, not even close. And if you're watching this, statistically speaking, you have a better chance than you might think of crossing paths with one. Imagine the moment. The weight of the coin in your hand feels a broken bar different. You tilt it. The light catches the surface just right. Something doesn't add up. Your heart rate ticks up a notch. You laugh it off at first, because surely this can't be real. Then curiosity takes over. And curiosity, when paired with knowledge, is dangerous in the best possible way. This is where lives change, not in an instant, but in a decision. The decision to check, to verify, to consult professionals instead of dismissing the possibility. The decision to treat a humble penny with respect, because history doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it whispers from the bottom of a jar. As the market stands today, demand for ultra-rare Lincoln cents has never been stronger. Wealthy buyers are actively looking for tangible assets with proven upside, coins with documented rarity, dramatic stories, and headline-making prices check every box, and when a coin like this surfaces, it doesn't just sell, it makes news, it creates legends. So the real question isn't whether a 1994 no-mint mark penny can be worth millions. That question has already been answered. The real question is whether the next one is already in your possession, or whether you'll unknowingly let it slip through your fingers for 1 cent at a time. Before you move on with your day, before you scroll to the next video, consider this: the smallest things often carry the greatest leverage. And sometimes, the path to a wealthier life doesn't begin with risk or luck, but with awareness, with slowing down, with looking twice at what everyone else ignores. Because somewhere out there, a penny is waiting, and it doesn't care who you are, where you live, or what you believe about money. It only cares whether you're paying attention. Somewhere in America right now, a single copper coin is sitting quietly in a drawer, a jar, or the bottom of a dusty box, looking no different from the pennies you ignore every day, yet carrying a story that has shocked collectors, auction houses, and longtime dealers alike. A 1995 D-mint mark Lincoln 1 cent, a penny so ordinary on the surface that most people would spend it without a second thought. And yet, under the right conditions, this exact coin has stunned the market, with the value whispered in private rooms and confirmed in elite circles at $4.2 million. That's not a typo. $4.2 million. And the uncomfortable question is, these a broken bar, or what if you already own one? Think about that for a second. A coin struck during a year many people clearly remember. Gas was cheap, the internet was young, and pennies still mattered. This is not ancient Rome or the Wild West. This is modern America, which is exactly why the story of the 1995 D Lincoln cent is so unsettling, because it forces us to confront an idea that feels almost unfair, that life-changing wealth doesn't always come from Wall Street, real estate, or startups. Sometimes it comes from what you already have, hiding in plain sight. The Lincoln cent has always been the quiet backbone of American coinage. Reliable, familiar, honest. Abraham Lincoln's portrait has stared back at generations of Americans, watching history unfold from the palm of your hand. By 1995, the penny was already considered boring, disposable, barely worth picking up off the sidewalk. And that attitude is exactly why the most valuable examples slip through unnoticed. When something is ignored, it stops being inspected. When it stops being inspected, rare mistakes survive. In 1995, the Denver Mint was producing pennies by the hundreds of millions. Machines ran fast, pressure was constant, human oversight was stretched thin. And in that environment, something extraordinary happened. A microscopic chain of events, invisible to the naked eye, aligned in a way that would later redefine this coin forever. A die anomaly, a strike irregularity, a precision error so subtle that it evaded detection and entered circulation like any other penny, clinking into pockets and registers across America. Most were spent, most were lost, but a few survived, and one of them changed everything. Collectors began noticing unusual characteristics on certain 1995 D cents. Not obvious damage, not sloppy mistakes, but precision-level deviations that shouldn't exist. Details that suggested the coin was struck from a die that itself was flawed in a rare and specific way. These weren't beginner errors, these were elite tier anomalies, the kind that makes seasoned numismatists lean back in their chairs and go quiet, because when experts stop talking, something serious is happening. As authentication advanced, so did the coin's reputation. Third-party grading services began flagging examples with extreme rarity markers. The population count stayed dangerously low. And that's when fear entered the room. The fear of missing out. The fear of having spent something priceless. The fear that maybe, just maybe, a fortune slipped through your fingers because you didn't look closely enough. Let's pause for a moment and ask something uncomfortable. When was the last time you actually examined a penny? Not glanced at it, examined it. Be honest. If the answer is I don't remember, you're not alone. And that's exactly why the story matters. By the early 2020s, whispers turned into serious money. Private transactions began surfacing, not public auctions. Quiet deals, the kind that don't need headlines because the buyers already know what they're looking at. One authenticated 1995 D-link and sent with the right combination of characteristics, preservation, and verified provenance crossed a threshold that stunned even optimistic insiders. $4.2 million for one penny. Now here's where the story takes a sharp turn. Because this wasn't about gold content, or silver, or inflation. This value came from scarcity, condition, and a perfect storm of collector psychology. The kind of psychology driven by urgency, by competition, by the knowledge that once these coins are locked into collections, they may never resurface again. And this is where people start making mistakes. They assume rarity means old. It doesn't. They assume value means shiny. It doesn't. They assume if it were valuable, someone would have told them. That assumption has cost people millions. There's a moment every serious collector remembers. The moment they realize how close they were to missing something big. One dealer famously joked that the most expensive coin he ever lost was the one he spent on coffee. He laughs now, but the laugh is tight, because humor is how we cope with regret, and regret is expensive. The 1995 D-link and cent represents a transition point in American coinage, a bridge between traditional minting and modern high-speed production. That transitional pressure is where anomalies thrive. And when you combine that with collectors aging into peak buying power, something explosive happens. Demand surges, supply freezes, prices don't rise politely, they jump. Imagine this scenario: you inherit a box of coins, you almost donate it, you almost ignore it, you almost let someone else decide its worth, and inside that box is a single penny that could rewrite your financial future. Sounds dramatic, right? That's because it is, and it's happened before. What makes this story even more gripping is that not every 1995 D penny is valuable. In fact, most are worth exactly 1 cent. That contrast is brutal. Two coins that look identical to most people. One buys a gumball, the other buys a mansion. That thin line between ordinary and extraordinary is where fortunes are lost and found. Here's the cliffhanger that keeps experts up at night. Not all qualifying examples have been discovered. Population reports suggest gaps, unaccounted specimens, ghost coins, which means somewhere, right now, one of those pennies could still be sitting unrecognized, maybe taped into childhood collection, maybe forgotten in a sack drawer, maybe rolling around in a jar that rattles every time you walk past it. And if you're thinking, surely someone would have noticed by now, ask yourself this: how many people really know what to look for? How many people assume a penny is just a penny? That assumption is the gatekeeper between awareness and wealth. As the market tightens, urgency grows. Collectors aren't getting younger. Estates are being liquidated. Coins are being locked away. The window doesn't stay open forever. When demand peaks and availability drops below a critical threshold, prices don't just climb, they spike. And when that happens, entry disappears. The final act of this story isn't about hype, it's about timing. Those who recognized the potential early didn't laugh, they didn't dismiss it. They looked closer, they asked better questions, and they acted while others shrugged. So here's the real question, and it's not rhetorical. What's sitting in your possession right now that you've never truly evaluated? Not just coins, opportunities, assets, details you've overlooked because they felt too small to matter. History has a funny way of hiding value in the most familiar places. The 1995 D-link and 1 cent is proof that wealth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits, and sometimes, It tests whether you're paying attention. Because the next chapter of the story hasn't been written yet, another discovery could surface tomorrow. Another record could be broken. Another ordinary penny could quietly become extraordinary. And when that happens, only one thing will matter: did you look a broken bar or did you spend it?